Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is Holly Sharpe. She is here to celebrate, dream it, and do it. Before we invite Holly in to celebrate her wonderful book, I have reason to celebrate right now. We are originally publishing this episode of the podcast on March 7th, 2021. Just about 1 year ago, almost 1 year to the date, I was scheduled to perform live at one of my favorite places to perform in the world, the East Boston branch of the Boston Public Library. And then the nasty coronavirus pandemic reared its ugly head and everything got locked down. And that performance, in addition to shows and sporting events and the Olympics and everything else, were canceled. Well, we're really excited. We're not ready to be live and in person yet, but on March 27th, 2021, we will be celebrating the 150th birthday of the East Boston branch of the Boston Public Library. It is. I was really surprised to find out it was the first municipally funded branch library in the country. What an amazing thing. And it's a beautiful place. And my old neighborhood of East Boston, our virtual performance is happening. Folks who live and work and patronize the East Boston branch of the library are going to get first dibs to attend the virtual performance. But if you are interested in being part of that show, let us know. Drop us a line, jedley@jedley.com, and Jedley is spelled Jedlie. And hey, you may be interested in having me present a virtual performance of my show. The magic between us is respect and kindness for your community. And this would be a great way for you to check it out. So, March 27th, 2021, virtual performance for the East Boston branch of the Boston Public Library. The branch is turning 150 years old. It's almost as old as me. Join us on the line right now from right outside of Detroit and Michigan. She is here to celebrate, dream it, and do it. Please welcome to the show, Holly Sharpe. Holly, how are you?
I'm great. It's so good to be here. Thank you.
I love the title of your book, Dream It and Do It. It's something that when I was a soccer coach coaching a very competitive high school team, we would talk about visualizing something and going out there and doing it. When both of my kids were younger, my daughter was a dancer. We would talk about visualizing herself on stage. My son played football, same thing. Me, when I'm doing my educational magic shows, I always the night before visualize myself in front of the audience doing my gig. Sometimes I dream that I don't have all my equipment with me, and that gets me all upset. But it's it's that whole idea of before you can do it, a lot of times you need to see it and you need to visualize it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have one without the other, right? Because I know a lot of wonderful dreamers that have nothing to show for all their dreams, and I know a lot of great executors who don't have the dreams to put behind their great plans. So really, that the winning combination is having wonderful dreams and having the stick-to-itiveness to do it.
Awesome. I want to talk to you about that and what inspired you to write the book. But before we do, one of the things that I read a study one time that kids who have dreams do better in school. They're demonstrably better in school. Kids who have dreams and goals and all of that. And so I decided I would just, and to me that seemed weird because I was thinking back to being a kid. I'm thinking all kids have dreams. They all want to be a fireman one day, a cop the next day, a truck driver. And so I decided I'd do a little experiment, very unscientific. And for like a week, I would ask my audiences, and usually it's an audience of 400 or 500 kids, and I would ask them, how many kids here have a dream? How many kids think, when I grow up, I want to do this? It's okay if it's going to change, but, and just raise your hand. And I never had more than half of the kids raise their hand. And that blew me away.
Yes, that kind of surprises me too, because maybe it's because I've written the book that the kids in my life right now can't wait to tell me what they're dreaming to be. Even when I brought the book home for the first time, all my nieces and nephews flipped to the story that they wanted to be and said, "Oh, this is me. I'm Beverly Bass," or I'm going to be a pilot, or I'm going to be a ballerina or a veterinarian, whatever. So I feel like the kids in my life have really taken to this idea of like, what do you want to be today? But I do agree also with what you said, that it changes so much at that age too,
right.
That even if let's talk about the 50% that did raise their hand. I do feel like it changes all the time. So, I think to be exposed to enough things that, like, as your interests continue to evolve and change, that you have ideas of other things that you can be outside what kids typically think of. But I'd be curious if you had a chance to, like, evaluate or talk to any of the kids that didn't raise their hand.
I didn't, because I'm up there and I'm doing my show and it's, finished and you have to go to another school. So yeah, like I said, it was very unscientific. They might have been thinking I was speaking German and just didn't understand what I was asking. But I did have a chance to talk to some of the teachers at those schools, and I shared with them that I was surprised that not more, that more kids hadn't raised their hands, and the teachers didn't seem to be. And I think that was something that disturbed me too. It's like, if you're a teacher, you're noticing this, you got to start talking to kids about having dreams.
What it does make sense about is some of the research I've seen for adults. There's a Gallup poll done in 2017 that showed that 50% of adults wish they'd chosen a different college major, and 2/3 wish they had a different job. Like, that's an incredible amount of grown-ups to not be happy with the choices that they made about what to study or what to do. Like, that's an incredible amount of time and money, and if you spend more of your life working than you do with your significant other or your family, that to hear that half didn't know, maybe that those two numbers together make some sense.
Yeah. So before we go any further, I think this is a great time to ask you what folks are going to experience when they sit down and they experience Dream It and Do It together as a family.
Sure. So Dream It and Do It is a nonfiction book for elementary school kids. It features 100 different real-world people doing 100 different jobs. So it looks at people that you may or may not know and really tells the story of what their job is about, what they did that was special with their job, and then things that maybe kids can go do to experience what it would be like to do that job.
Wow. So who are some of the people we're going to meet?
So it's broken down into a number of different sections. So there are artistic people. So we have people like Dr. Seuss and Mindy Kaling. There are performers like Kid President. There's designers. So we've got people that did draw cartoons, designers like Joanna Gaines. There's a number of different helper sections. So people who served in service or medical. Like I mentioned a veterinarian earlier. So I did Dr. Pol from Disney, some growth, helpers, nature helpers. And then I do a whole section on business, which that's my background. So I have a bit of affinity for that particular section. So you'll see people what I really like about this section too is that it addresses things that kids probably aren't nearly as familiar with. So there's an economist in here. There's a logistics specialist. And I found ways to tell their story in a way that kids could still relate to and understand. And then I also talk about product developers and discoverers.
Yeah. I love that. I especially love the section that you love the most, the section about the business, and because I know I'm picking up my phone right now to show Holly, and I'm sure she has a better one than me, but kids have these incredible things in their pockets. Most third and fourth graders are walking around with these things. They have, and this little rectangle has a professional video studio in it, and a professional audio studio in it, and a communication center, and I can send a message to this that will go to the other side of the world in a flash, and I can speak to that person through video, through audio, and most kids don't think anything about it, and they have no idea of the incredible teamwork that's necessary to make that possible. The people who invented it, who designed it, who put it on a truck, who drove the truck, who got it to you, the people running the networks, and I mean it's just it's a celebration of cooperation and creativity, I think.
Yeah, and I made a special point in this section to call it a lemonade stand, because I totally agree with you that unlike a lot of the other sections where, you can go be a veterinarian and you don't necessarily need the other people in the medical community to support you, where if you go into business, it's almost certain that even if you're the person that's making the product, you're also working with the CEO, with human resources, with buyers, with sales, with research. So it really exposes kids to all of the different parts of the cog that are necessary, like you said, to actually bring something to life, whether it's a product or a service.
Yeah. And that's something that I had absolutely no clue of when I was growing up, and especially when I was in high school and college, and I was going to change the world, and I was getting into social work, and I was going to work with people and make this dramatic change in the world. And the reality, was social workers are needed, and they're doing something really, really special. But to really change the world are people in businesses that are making people's lives better.
The thing that I really tried hard to do with this book, and I was really proud of the review for this book in Midwest Review came out yesterday, and the thing that they said about it that I'm super proud of is that for each story, I talk about how they take their talent and made the world a better place. So to your point, you don't necessarily have to work for a nonprofit to make the world better. One of my favorite stories in here, I mentioned the logistics story, is a woman who worked in UPS logistics, and she studied how world hunger works in terms of where the food starts and who it needs to get to. And the point she makes is we don't have a food problem in this world. There's actually enough food to feed all of the people. What we have is a logistics problem, and it introduces children to the idea of logistics through this woman who's working with logistics to try to bring food to more people around the world. So I think it's, stories like that where like logistics might sound like something that frankly even adults think, ugh, that sounds nice and boring. But really when applied, with a real life example and making the world a better place, now all of a sudden logistics actually sounds like a place where you could make a real difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm wondering, when you were creating the book, and I want to ask you about your inspiration for the book, but before that, I'm wondering, did you have obviously you didn't have a chance to talk to Dr. Seuss unless you have a hotline to heaven, but did you interview folks for this book, or do research, or talk to people who know them?
It was a mix. So the nice thing about this book is that not everyone in it is a celebrity. So I did have the chance to connect with quite a few people and interview them directly. But for every single person, regardless of whether I interviewed them or not, I read something or watched something that was initially from them. So it came from their own words, from their own heart. So I chose people that had written autobiographies or that had taken part in a documentary or a TED Talk that I wanted to hear about their journey through them. So I really avoided anyone that, was written about by a secondary source and went straight to their words, whether it was words that I got directly from them or from their writing. But it was such a fun journey to get to know 100 different people over the course of the last 6 months.
Yeah, neat. And I love these books especially these non-fiction books that it's something you don't necessarily have to sit down and read from cover to cover. You can take say I want to read that logistics section, or I want to read that artistic section. I only have a couple of minutes. I'm going to read about Dr. Seuss, and I think that's real fun.
Yeah, and I like how it evolves for kids too, because I find that as I've given this to kids and kind of watched them interact with it, they almost certainly go the very first story, they'll go right to the middle of the book and find the thing that is in their head that day that they want to do. But what's really fun to watch is after they've kind of exhausted those couple of stories where I want to be a fireman, I want to be a ballerina, I want to be a teacher, which are all wonderful careers to be, but then they start to kind of get into the ones that are tangents to them and go, oh, well, I could also be a police officer. I could also serve in the military, or I could, it starts to lead them down different paths. And that to me is the really fun part of watching kids interact with this, is once they get through kind of that initial stage, when they start discovering things that they didn't maybe think about themselves before.
Yeah. And that's neat too, because I meet a lot of kids and, they want to do those things that you mentioned. They want to be a baseball player. They want to be a ballerina. They want to be in a band or a singer. You have that glamorous in the spotlight job that not a lot of people can have. It's not realistic for a lot of people. But if you love music, there are hundreds of different ways that you can make a living in the music industry. If you love basketball, you don't have to be the basketball player. There's loads of different ways that you can make a living with basketball. And so I'm happy that you have a way for kids to branch out and look at these different areas.
And I tried to, even for the seemingly quote-unquote impossible jobs, to show kids that there are ways to go into those fields without having to be a superstar. So, for example, the story I wrote about being a singer, I wrote about a number of different backup singers and who, like, the fact that they've gotten to travel the world and all that they've been able to do with their voices. Or there's a voice actor in my book. So, maybe you don't need to be on the stage. You can go be the voice behind cartoons, which is a really great way to get into acting without having to go maybe the traditional route that people do that's a little bit harder. So I really did try to find a way to present fields that are difficult to get into in a way that maybe is more approachable.
Yeah. That voice actor gig, that's great for somebody like me who has a face for radio. And, I want to know your inspiration. What inspired you to write this book?
It was definitely my daughter. I have a 9-month-old baby, which I can barely call a baby anymore. But I was looking for books for her for my various baby showers. So there's this new thing, I don't know if you've been to a shower recently, but where baby showers are starting to ask people to bring books instead of cards. And then everyone at the shower signs the inside of the book as though it were a card. And it's wonderful. We have this gorgeous library for her now. But as I was being asked to do that, I started thinking about, like, what are the books that I really want to own? Like, I love libraries. I would definitely plan on taking her there, but what do I want to own in my own personal library? And so we were looking for books about diversity and bullying and things that, I really want to teach her about. And then I started thinking about, who I want her to become. And I would love having books about different careers. And so I started putting things like Iggy Peck Architect in my cart and things like that. And then realized, like, why isn't there a book that condenses this and helps kids see that there's so many things you could be? I don't want to buy 100, single books. I'd love to have a book where, like, I love Rebel Girls. Rebel Girls is one of my favorite books of all time. In fact, I bought their initial book off Kickstarter, and I thought, why isn't there a book that's like Rebel Girls, but with instead of being about powerful women, it's about teaching kids about careers. So that's kind of how this came to be, was my searching for this book for my daughter and using my inspiration from Rebel Girls to kind of bring this to life.
Wow. Did you always dream yourself, talking about dreams, did you always dream about being a children's author?
Not in 1 million years. I've spent my life in new product development. So I've worked for companies that make brands like Raid and Glade, and I worked for an ice cream company for a while, which was really cool, and invented some new different types of ice cream. And so I'm trained to kind of look at the world, see what's missing, and help bring it to life. So this to me was more about leveraging that talent and figuring out, like, if this thing doesn't exist, how should it exist? What should it look like? How can I make sure that, I can treat this as a career and not just, a hobby that I'm actually funding versus the other way around. So, to be honest, I've kind of thought of this as my own new small business, and I'm very happy that as reviews come in, it turns out I can write as well. So that's been good news for me. Yeah. But yeah, my real dream was to own my own business one day and develop my own product. I can't say that I ever thought it would come in the form of a book, but now that it's here, I can't imagine my life without it. So I think now that I actually did it, I am a children's book author.
There you go. And we have a lot of authors who listen to the show. And if you take anything away from listening to the Reading with Your Kids podcast, please take away what Holly just said about when you are a children's author, you are the CEO of a small business. Your book is a business. And if you don't look at it that way, no one's going to be able to read it. And that's just the fact. And I know all the authors out there are like, no, I'm an artist. I'm creative. It doesn't matter. You need to do the business end of it. So excuse me for taking that little side road, but it's so important, I think. Yeah,
I agree with you. And frankly, the good that I want to do with this book doesn't do any good if it ends up on my daughter's bookshelf. And I mean, she'll love it, but if I don't treat it like it is a business, then I don't think that it would do nearly the good that it's capable of doing.
Exactly. You're talking about working new product development in an ice cream company and working with Raid. Glad you never got those mixed up. that would have been. There's a place you should travel. There's a village in Puerto Rico, and they make vegetable-flavored ice cream.
Tell me one of the vegetables. Do you remember?
Yucca. I think they made a yucca flavored ice cream.
I have tried some interesting things in my career, but I can't say that I've ever tried yucca-flavored ice cream. So next time I find myself in Puerto Rico, I will for sure hunt that down.
Absolutely. Well, I know people are going to want to hunt down Holly Sharpe, and they want to know where they can connect with you and find out more about your book, and find out if there are more books coming from you. I have a feeling that you've caught the bug.
Yes. So first I'll tell you about my next book that's coming out.
Sure.
I literally just kind of started putting pen to paper today. So I'm very, very jazzed to talk about it. It is going to be about exceptional children. So this book, I think 97 of the 100 people are adults. So they, kind of had this lengthy career to talk about. And in writing this, the 3 kids that I wrote about, it really made me realize how many exceptional people there are that do amazing things before they even graduate high school. So I wanted to kind of push a little bit harder in that space and help tell the story of the really doing it does not mean that you have to wait for college, that you have to wait for, to be a quote unquote grown up, that you can start doing exceptional things. And, I'm helping my niece write her first book as we speak. So it's, you do not have to wait to be an exceptional person, and certainly can start in your childhood. So I wanted to give kids that inspiration as kind of a follow up to this.
Awesome.
So, I hope to launch that sometime early this summer.
Great.
And I would love it if people could find me on Instagram. I'm at dream_it_and_do_it. And you can also find the hardcover version of my book on my website at dreamitanddoit.com. And you can find the paperback version on Amazon.
Awesome. And when we get off the air, I'm going to tell you about this little kid in Chicago who's raised like $30,000 for the Lurie Children's Hospital. Quite exceptional.
Daughter, right?
Yep, 7 years old.
It's so exceptional, and there's so many stories like that. I hope that Lori hears this and knows that I'm going to come to her and ask her about her daughter. And if anyone does hear this and knows of exceptional children in their lives, you can either ping me on Instagram or email me at dreamitanddoitbooks@gmail.com, and I would love to hear from any of your listeners about kids they might have in their life that are exceptional and their story is worthy of being shared.
That's wonderful. And we've had a great time speaking to the author and CEO of Dream It and Do It. The name of the book is Dream It and Do It, a great nonfiction book. And the author is Holly Sharpe. Holly, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Thomas Ray Garcia. You may remember that Thomas was on the show just a couple of months back to celebrate his book Speechless with Matt Eventhoff. Thomas is coming back again. He is part of an amazing nonprofit organization, College Scholarship Leadership Access Program down in Rio Grande Valley in Texas. And he is here to talk about that program because it's really doing an amazing job for the youth of his area. And I think the model that they are following and they are using to serve the youth is a model that can be replicated all around the country. And I think important programs like this deserve our attention and our support. So that's the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. If you are the author of a fantastic children's book, we would love for you to be a guest on Reading with Your Kids podcast. Being a guest, it's fun. It's easy. You don't need to pay anybody to facilitate your appearance. You don't need to pay anything at all. All you need to do is you go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page. Scroll on down to where it says Be a Guest, and it'll tell you everything you need. It's really fun, and we'd love to have you here. It's a wonderful way to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. Readingwithyourkids.com. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, want to thank our guest, Holly Sharpe. Be sure to check out Dream It and Do It. I also want to thank my team, Alejandro Doherty, Fatima Khan. I want to thank our great interns, Alexia Brown, Hannah Pat Oboyski. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy for having my back here in the studio. But most of all, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.